Family of records in SQL. The family of records are created by the designers in the platform according to their needs, and the SQL table that contains these families, a list with all of these families, is called familias definibles. And when we go to this table, we're going to be able to find a unique ID for each one of these families, and besides, we're going to find a name. So it's going to be very easy to identify all the families that have been created, all the families of records that have been created in the database. There's also another couple tables that are quite interesting. We have familias definibles clases and familias definibles árbol. Here we can see all the information of the different classes and of the tree and with all the branches where we're classifying our records. And then there's these dynamic tables that are going to be created dynamically. So each time we create a new family, there's going to be a table that's going to be called AP din familias, and it's going to have an ID. We'll talk about this later. And this one contains most of the information of the family. So the first thing we're going to do is look for these fixed tables. We're going to filter, and we're going to find one that's called familias definibles. It contains one line per each family, and it also contains the ID, the unique identification number, and the name of the family. Then we're going to search for familias definibles árbol, and this one contains the ID, the name of each branch. And we're also going to be able to look for familias definibles clases that contains the name and the ID that corresponds to each class that we've created. So these three tables are fixed and they're already created. But as I mentioned, there's also going to be other tables that are going to be created dynamically each time we build or we create a new family of records. So we're going to see how to identify these dynamic tables in the database. Okay, so for each new family that we create, a new table is created, similar to the panel table in the classes of processes. So the ID identifies this family. We already mentioned that there's a table where we can find all the IDs of the different families that we've created. So when we go to the database, if I see a family, for example, with ID 4, okay, I know which one it is, or if it has the ID 5 or ID 10, whatever. Then, the same as we've already explained for the processes, when we have a multiple selection field, or we have a group of fields in a family of records, the same as in a panel of a process, we're going to have a table that's created, and it's going to have first the ID of the family, and then it's going to have the ID for the group of fields or of the multiple selection field. And we can dig even deeper because we could also go to affiliated groups of fields or maybe a multiple selection term that's inside of a group of fields and things like that. Okay, so these are these dynamic tables that are going to be created or generated as soon as we start building new families of records in the system. So all we have to do is enter and filter these tables, and once we look for them, we're going to find them all with their different IDs. So here we can see an example where we have different families. This one, for example, has the ID 1. Here I can see this one has an ID 1, but there's another ID behind it. Probably this is a group of fields or a multiple selection term inside of this family. Here we have 3 levels. This means that probably this would be the ID of the family, this would be the ID of the group of fields, and this is probably the ID of an affiliated group of fields. So this is basically the same as in the processes. So when we already learned how to search data in a process, we also learn about these different tables. The only difference is they have a different name. But based on this information, we can find anything, any data, applying the exact same steps that we've applied for the processes. But now we're going to learn how to do the exact same thing with the families without entering into so much detail. So here we can see the different steps to find a dynamic table. First of all, we said we have to go to familias definibles. We see a list with all the different families and their IDs. Now, once we have this, we can go to familias definibles clases. And here we can find all the information of the classes. We can also find, based on this ID, on the ID 3, we can find the table, the dynamic table that has been created for this family. So it would be AP din familias and a number 3. And here we're going to find all the information of the different elements that have been created, the different records that have been created in this family of records. Let's enter the platform and let's find my families of records. And here we can see I've got several created with different names. For example, this one's called car dealership. I have one here that's called articles. I have one here, it's called products. It's got the ID 3. Let's focus on this one here that's got this ID, number 3. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to enter this table. It's called Familias Definibles, and it's going to show me a list of all the different families that have been created in my platform. And here I have one that's called products, and it has the ID 3. Okay, if I filter, for example, let me go here. I'm going to filter by familias. Here I can also find the tables for the classes. For example, here for the branches of the tree, for the classes. And I can also find the table that has been created. As soon as I created this family with the ID 3, the new table was created. And here we can see it down here. AP Din Familias 3. If we open this table here, we can find all of the rows, and in these rows we can find all the main information. There is some information that I can't find here. For example, here I can't find the values of this simple selection field. We can't find the group of fields either. We can't find a multiple selection term. We already know that there are going to be these here with an additional ID. We've already learned this from the previous session. Now we're going to open the exercise 5.05. We're going to read point 1 and 2 and 3, and then we're going to complete part 3.1 and 3.2.